everybody. Welcome to the History Things podcast, stop number 4, Instagram video exclusive 156th anniversary coverage of the Battle of Monocacy Junction, the battle that saved Washington. So thank you guys for following along with us thus far in our program. We now bring you to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, roughly, on July 9th, 1864. Confederate General John Brown Gordon has been bringing his troops onto line. Remember, this battle has shifted from going down the Georgetown Pike to now facing more of this kind of direction. If you're looking down from a satellite image and you follow the road, it used to parallel the road. Now it has swung around across the river, is now going perpendicular to the Georgetown Pike, modern day 355. Behind us in the distance, you may or may not be able to see Brooks Hill. This is the small patch of grass you might be able to see between this front row of trees, which is obscuring modern day Interstate 270. And up there you can see the further row of trees on top of the hill. This is along the area where John Brown Gordon has been forming his battle line. His infantry is coming up. And around 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when, I guess, John Brown Gordon will term it as some of the most fierce fighting that he would personally witness for the entirety of the war. And to those of you who know about John Brown Gordon, he has seen a thing or two, especially by this point in 1864, because he is a relative bullet magnet, because he's been wounded, I think, minimum 4 or 5 times at Antietam alone.
Correct.
And probably a couple times on the way to here. So for a guy that's been through all that to say that this action we're about to talk about is some of the worst stuff he's seen, that says a lot about what we're about to talk about, Matt. So it's 3 o'clock on July 9th. We're about to have some action on the Thomas Farm.
Absolutely, Pat. What's going to happen is that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Confederate cavalry, John McCausland's boys, are going to try one more time to break this Union line here on Thomas Farm. Once more they would move forward, and once more they're going to be thrown back. This time, though, they're going to be actually falling back through the ranks of Gordon's forming infantry. And one of his brigade commanders, Clement Evans of the Georgia Brigade, would actually call out to his men, mocking his fellow Confederates, telling his foot soldiers, his infantrymen, "Come on, boys, let's show these cavalrymen how to fight. It's just 100 days men and can't stand up to our troops." So this idea that they're still fighting 100 days men and militia has not, or is still the mindset, I should say, of the Confederate High Command.
Has not dawned on them that there are veterans here yet, guys.
Exactly right. Now, General Evans, he's going to have to eat some crow, because it would be his men leading off the infantry attacks against this Federal line here on Thomas Farm. The Georgia Brigade is going to step out, move against the flank of the Union line. They are going to attack 3 times, and 3 times they would be knocked back in the process. Clement Evans would be twice wounded in these attacks and removed from the field. Now, these hammer blow attacks, though, are exactly what John Brown Gordon was looking for, because though the Federal line is holding, they're being forced to pull troops from other parts of the line. This is going to be what's known as an attack in echelon. The Georgia Brigade is going to attack and continue to press the line. As this Union line is pulling troops from its center and even its right, the Louisiana Brigade
is a consolidated set of guys at this point. The Louisiana brigades have been chewed up along the way. So you have like 5th, 6th, and 7th all in one sort of like kind of unit and stuff like that. So the Louisianans are here, small in numbers, consolidated, but battle-hardened veterans.
Absolutely. And that Louisiana brigade is going to step out and now slam into the center of the Union line, forcing that section to now call upon reinforcements. Finally, General Terry's brigade of Virginia troops, which includes the old Stonewall Brigade, is going to hammer the right flank of the Union line. And it's going to be Terry's brigade and his men that'll eventually find the River or Water Road, a very old road that runs along the edge of the Monocacy River. They're actually going to take that to sweep around the flank of the Federal line, forcing it to fall back beyond us here to what is today Araby Church Road at around 4 p.m. So what we're going to do is we're going to swing the camera around so that you can look across these fields, the same fields that were attacked over by John Brown Gordon's forces. These fields here, Gordon's men are going to advance. Off in the distance, that tree line is the Araby Church Road. Now, Araby Church Road was part of the Georgetown Pike in 1864, and it would be on that slightly rising ground that Federal forces would rally. There they will hold from approximately 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. These Federal troops holding there for about an hour. However, over this hour, the Confederate line is going to be stretching around both of their flanks, beginning to wrap around both the flanks of their line. By around 4:30, all of the long-range ordnance for the Union artillery has been expended, and those guns would be withdrawn.
For a moment, let's touch on the artillery, because that's something we haven't gotten into yet. And the Federal artillery is a kind of unique and semi-ridiculous story on the battlefield. We had mentioned a few guns that they brought up. We'd mentioned the disparity in numbers between the Federal guns and Confederate guns. Matt, let's tell our listeners a little bit about... Let's tell our listeners a little bit about the artillery situation for the Federals here at Monocacy Junction.
Sure. Now, the Union artillery here at Monocacy Junction is 7 cannon. We have the 6 rifled pieces from Alexander's Baltimore Artillery, and we have one 24-pound smoothbore howitzer that is in a blockhouse guarding the Iron Railroad Bridge. That blockhouse gun is going to be utilized throughout the morning. It's a heavier piece, fires a big 24-pound round. It's a pretty scary piece of hardware until it gets jammed. Unfortunately, we have lesser experienced soldiers who had actually come out here specifically to train on this gun in the midst of this fight. And in their excitement, they will actually load the round down the barrel first and then put the powder charge on top of that. There is no way for that powder charge to be detonated, and they have now jammed their gun. They're going to attempt to unjam it as much as they can. They would be unsuccessful. They would eventually dismount the barrel and take it away with them.
So 7 guns, now we're down to 6 guns.
Correct. And by 4:30, those 6 rifled pieces have burned through all of their ammunition. They're going to be withdrawn, and by 5 o'clock, General Lew Wallace, recognizing that he has done all he can, is going to order a retreat from the field. As this Federal line begins to give way back towards the Gambrel Mill, where we're going to wrap things up, this is where many of the Union casualties will occur as they are gobbled up by advancing Confederate infantry.
Now, one of the things that's really hard to grasp, just from the perspective of how filming things works, is the space that we're talking about behind us. The fields in which the Union and Confederate forces were engaging once they sort of moved out of the field behind your perspective now, where we've turned the camera around, this is the equivalent of maybe 3.5 football fields at most. This is a very close and intimate fight. It's one of the reasons why the casualty counts are so high. These battle-hardened veterans are finally now showing, their strength against a lot of these inexperienced guys who are still holding their own, who are supported by Federal veterans and things like that. But this is really where a lot of the meat is chewed up, so to speak, just because of the proximity and the combatants on the field. So I always like to point out that, not every Civil War battle, even if it's in a field, is taking place with this huge sweeping ground. And while this ground is pretty big to us who's fighting, if you're trying to imagine the logistics of moving a lot of fighting men, artillery, smoke, and chaos around, this is not a very big space to be fighting in. So we're going to head on over to the Gambrel Gambrel Mill, rather, sorry. We're going to wrap things up here for you. Again, we've been really appreciative of you guys following along with the History Things podcast, Instagram exclusive for the 1864 Battle of Monocacy Junction.
Are you ready?